This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Calvin, we're going to miss you. We love you. Cue the sappy music.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
Let's play a little bit more.
Planes we flew, good things we've been through. Then I'll be standing right here talking to you about another path.
It's the Hindsight 20 podcast. I am your host, Jerry Mallory. I'm trying to see here. I've been under a rock the last 7 days since our last show. Did anything interesting happen with the Lions? Of course, guys. There's been a ton that's going on. First and foremost, it's Calvin Johnson retiring. We're going to probably dedicate the whole first half to Calvin. I don't have any notes prepared. Just off the top of my head, what's in my head, what's in my heart for Calvin Megatron, where he stands in terms of receivers all time. Is he a Hall of Famer? How he'll be looked at and viewed amongst his peers, amongst the lore of Lions history. We got to talk Calvin. Then in the second half, we will get into the free agencies, the signings, Marvin Jones, a couple of guys coming back, Haloti Ngata. We'll get into all of those and how each and every one of these moves, because as we know, every move affects the next one, how these moves affect the draft that is coming up. Are there any positions that are kind of, out of play in the first couple of rounds? We'll get into all of that. But first and foremost, we got to just absolutely have to talk about Calvin Megatron Johnson retiring from the NFL. There was so much speculation, and let's just put all that to rest. There was so much speculation on why the decision was taken so long, if he had ulterior motives. You know the rumors, waiting for the season tickets to be deposited, the deposit date to pass. He was holding out so that he can get traded or cut so he can go to a contender. All along his camp, time and time out, said, guys, Calvin's hurt. He wants to play football, but his body just is beat down. And if he wants to play, and if he does play, it's going to be for Detroit. We'll never know 100%, but by all accounts, him stepping aside, and he gave the statement, all accounts to me shows that, yes, he does love the game. He loved Detroit, especially Coach Caldwell, giving him a specific mention, although only being his coach for 2 seasons, kind of showing the impact that Caldwell has on guys like Calvin, the whole team. If you think about it, he's always mentioned as a big influence. And then mentioning the fans, the city, mentioning the Fords. He certainly seemed to be someone who he loved this city. He loved the sport. But the body took its toll, man. And after so long, after so many hits, even his highlights, when we looked at the Calvin highlights, the big catch, big run, after a catch, the touchdown, he was always getting hit. Even on the touchdowns, it seemed like he would jump in the air, and just such a big target. The body it can only take so much. And so he decided to retire. And I'm going to put it to rest. For me, all the speculation and the things that, we thought may have been reasons, et cetera, I'm putting those to bed. And I'm saying what he said, what his family said, all the rumors were true. Here's a guy that quite simply gave it his all. The body just was not responding like it should. Always nicked up, always dinged up. And so he decided to call it quits. I mean, we're losing another great one. You're fortunate if you had the luxury of seeing Calvin and Barry Sanders. Now, some has had the luxury of seeing Calvin, Barry, and Billy Sims. I fall into the Barry and Calvin scenario. And really, if you think about it, for me, it's probably why I'm such a diehard Detroit Lions fan. If I think back to all that Barry Sanders did, there's a lot of 30-year-olds, a lot of guys my age that because of what Barry Sanders did, kind of sucked us into football, specifically the Lions, because he was magical. He was great. And so there's a slew of young ones, I'm going to say now, 14, 15 years old who got to see Calvin Johnson in their teenage years, in their preteen years, that will forever be Lions fans. He revolutionized the position, and he did it without the fanfare. Some of the best receivers had the baggage. Terrell Owens, I love this man's game. Randy Moss, one of the best ever. So talented. People want to say, oh, it was just fly routes, whatever. The guy was phenomenal. I can go on and on with these receivers. It's a position that has baggage. And so it's such a luxury to sit there and watch a guy that was humble. It wasn't me first. You would never hear him complain and say, hey, I need more balls thrown my way. He went to work. He showed up. And when you got a guy on your team that's that good, everyone else in that position group has to fall in line. How dare Roy Williams, Nate Burleson go and demand the ball more when Calvin Johnson isn't sitting there and saying, give me the ball. I need more touches. Even when we would say it or it would be hinted at, he never made a big deal about it. He went about his business, a true professional on and off the field of play. And so you got to love it. And so where does he stand in terms of all time? Now, in terms of Lions, we already know. The lovely Miss Telly came on when the news first broke that he was considering retirement. And what she said rung true. We were at every game this year, every home game, and just about, everyone we went to, I say 4 or 5 out of the 8, there was another record being broken by Calvin, receiving yards, touchdowns, consecutive games doing this, that, or the other thing, consecutive games with at least one catch. You name it, the records were shattered by Calvin Johnson this whole year in terms of the Lions. So yes, he is the greatest Lion receiver ever. And in a future show, we're going to sit down and talk about how good was he? All-time Lions. I mean, off the top of my head, he has to be in the top 6 or 7 all time. Now, we don't have a storied franchise. Some teams can rattle off 15 to 20 Hall of Famers. That's not us, not quite, but we have some pretty good players. We know, your Lynn Barneys and your Barry Sanders. We can go even further back. And so, Buddy Lane, Bobby Lane, Dick Night-Train Lane. There's a lot of guys that we can talk about. But Calvin has to be up there, and that's for a future show when we got some notes and some statistics and things like that. But in terms of where he stands in this modern era, he is the best. He is the standard bearer of receivers, not just for the Lions, but for the whole NFL. And the last few years, let's be honest, he was not Megatron. He was not the Megatron we had become accustomed to. See, we were accustomed to the Megatron that would catch anything over anybody, will run past you. Still a good receiver. I mean, 88 catches, 1,300 yards, 9-10 touchdowns. That's good. But it was not the Calvin of old. And so you started to see your Antonio Browns, Odell Beckham Jr.'s, A.J. Green, Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant. You start to see some of these guys kind of creeping up and probably surpassing Calvin if we're talking about your top whatever receivers. But he's leaving the game still fully entrenched as a top 10 receiver in this game, probably top 5, definitely top 10. And in terms of the impact that he had on his team, astronomical. Now, here's a dirty little secret. Last year, not exactly a year ago, a little bit before that, into that 11-5 season, we had an issue because we're sitting there with, a good record, tons of talent, but we had a big issue. Calvin, Sue, and Stafford. Lots of money going around. Okay. Sue making, what was his last year at? 20-something million because the can kept getting kicked down the road because of restructures. Stafford, 17, 18 million. Calvin in the 20s. You can't function like that. The NFL doesn't work to where it's 53 guys. You can't have 3 guys taking up, that much of your cap. You can't have 3 guys taking up 30 to 40% of your cap. But that's what we were headed at. And so the dirty little secret was we had to make a decision. And it's kind of weird because if I'm ranking who were the best 3, and I did this on my show on Pride Detroit, the videos, I said Calvin's probably number 2, actually. Sue, in my opinion, was the best of the 3, followed by Calvin and then Stafford. People laughed and said, no, Calvin's number 1. But to me, I just started to see a little bit of a decline. It was close. But the dirty little secret was, realistically, especially financially, we probably had to get rid of 2. And oddly enough, the guy who was probably number 3, being your quarterback, was the guy that that's the guy that needs to probably stay on your team. You look at Brock Osweiler. See how much money he's got? See how much money he's getting? Look at Kirk Cousins. It's a quarterback's league. And a lot of people have different opinions, differentiating opinions, however you want to word it, on Stafford. I am of the belief that he is, probably on the outskirts of top 10. That being said, it's the money position. And so the dirty little secret was something had to give. And whether it was Calvin retiring or us making a tough decision if he didn't want to take that pay cut, It was bound to happen. Now, Mayhew started the process, not bringing back Sue, too much money. Aren't we glad? Miami already restructuring, kicking the can down the road, built to get cut in a couple of years, the way that's panning out. And then it was Calvin. The dirty secret was, well, if we're keeping one, it probably is going to have to be the quarterback. Quarterbacks don't grow on trees. Look at Cleveland, year in, year out, trying to fix it, trying to find a quarterback. Your Super Bowl champions, they're so desperate, Mark Sanchez may end up being their starting quarterback. There isn't a ton of guys at a quality level. Stafford is there. He's the youngest, most important position by far. The dirty little secret was this may be the best for the long term in terms of what's good for the team. Sentimental value, what Calvin meant, et cetera, et cetera. All that does play, a part. But just looking at this thing, him walking away may be a good thing for the Lions, because now from a financial standpoint, because there's some guys about to get paid. Ziggy's going to be up there. He's going to be in that stratosphere. Okay. If Olivier Vernon can make 17, 18 million annually, Ziggy Zig is about to get paid. And that's about it. And Slade's going to get a decent amount, but it's probably going to be 13, 14. So you'll have two guys at about 17, one guy at about 13, as opposed to one guy at 17, one guy at 24, one guy at 23. It's a big difference, and it handicaps and it cripples your team. And so, yes, we do have flexibility even into this year with the extra cap space. But back to Calvin, the player, not, the reasons financially why it's prudent that he's no longer here. You hear a lot of people coming out and saying, he's not a Hall of Famer. And then you have the other, I would say bigger majority, it's probably 65-35, maybe 60-40, saying, yeah, of course he's a Hall of Famer. Well, where do we stand? I mean, come on, guys. The guy is a Hall of Famer. One thing you're going to have to do, a buddy of mine called 97.1 right when Calvin was contemplating retirement, and he made a really good point, saying we're going to have to start adjusting our view on what's a Hall of Fame player, because guys are retiring earlier. And so you may have to look at that capsule of, 10 years, 9 years, what they produced, because Calvin isn't one of the all times in terms of some of these important stats, your yards and receptions, because he didn't play long enough. Now, if he played another 5-6 years, those records would be shattered because he's on pace. You look at his average, average touchdowns per year, average receptions, average yards. He's way up there in the top 5 in most of those critical categories. That being said, some people are like, hey, it's all about the stats. If he's not, in those actual, not averages, if he's not in those actual categories, doesn't deserve to be a Hall of Famer. He should have played longer. And in addition, his team didn't win. I think it's ridiculous. When you have a guy that legitimately for 5 years completely dominated at his position, 2 years as a rookie in his second year, still very productive. The last 2 years, still top 5 to top 10. Are you kidding me? Is this guy a Hall of Famer? Don't think it should be a question. The guy will be going to Canton along with Peyton Manning, and it's a star-studded cast. Charles Woodson, guys retiring from the league this year. He's going to be right there with them. Now, people want to get all technical and anal. Is he first ballot? The guy is a Hall of Famer or he's not, okay? I know baseball gets really crazy with that. Oh, no one's ever been a unanimous first ballot. Somebody will always vote no because Babe Ruth didn't get 100%, so they're just bent on not letting anyone get 100%. Whatever, okay? The football guy is not as critical when it comes to first and second ballot and unanimous and all that garbage. Don't play games. Calvin needs to go in 5 years after he's retired, along with Peyton Manning, along with Charles Woodson. Some people saying Marshawn Lynch. I think he's more borderline than Calvin, if anything. The guy deserves to be in. It's not even close. We got to thank Al Davis, too, for allowing us to draft him. It's so crazy, man. Calvin is like a prototypical Al Davis guy, isn't he? You watch the combine, and, the fastest of the fast guys that give you 4.35 in the 40, and that's what Calvin was. But here's the kicker. Those fast guys are usually about 5'11" and about 190 pounds. Calvin, 6'5", 235 pounds, running a 4.35. The vertical well over 40 inches. The broad jump out of this world. I mean, this was a prototypical Al Davis guy. Now, Jamarcus Russell had some of those qualities too. Freakish arm strength, et cetera, et cetera. But, the one time Al Davis didn't, go after that skill position, maybe he felt he got burned by Darius Hayward. But I don't know what the reasoning was, but, you're so happy and fortunate that Al Davis didn't pull this move. And no one argued with Calvin. Now, keep in mind, this was Matt Millen, and he was known for messing up draft picks. I don't think even Millen could have messed this one up, because if you didn't draft Calvin, you have to assume it would have been Joe Thomas, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, or Adrian Peterson, who's going to be a Hall of Famer. It's one of those guys. So even Millen couldn't mess this draft up, but Calvin is the guy we got, and we're fortunate for it. And no one had a gripe with it, despite the fact that, you know what Millen did. Starting off with Charles Rogers, then Roy Williams, skip a year was Ernie Sims, but then Mike Williams. I mean, the guy loved his receivers. Like, dude, are you kidding me? But when this one came around, it's like, yeah, all that being said, bring this guy in. He's a surefire, can't miss prospect. He's going to be special. And he was. So, the Lions need to take care of business. They need to get number 81 in the Ring of Fame, or whatever the Lions version of it is, as well as 84, Herman Moore. Probably got to get Herman in first. Go ahead, take care of Herman next year, because he's one of the greats, second greatest receiver, in my opinion, in Lions history. Got to take care of Herman. Right after that, after a few years pass, got to take care of 81. Those two numbers should not be worn in Detroit. Now, let's talk about, from a team standpoint, the type of player that we're losing and how it impacts the team. Okay, we talking about Calvin the man, his mythos, if you will. What about brass tacks? How does this affect the wins and losses, the daily operation of the Detroit Lions? Well, it's going to affect it. It's no way it can't. Now, with all the injuries, I would expect another dip in production. If I'm predicting Calvin's season this year, if he got 88 catches, about 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns last year, with the injuries mounting up so bad that he retired, you got to predict that you would see another drop off and or missed games. I would put him at about 82 catches, 1,200, 1,100 yards, 1,150, 7-8 touchdowns. Still really good, still right up there. But the impact is not so much in the stats, because and we'll talk about Marvin Jones in a second. I love Marvin Jones. Predicted him to come here. Almost had the money dead on right. I think he's underrated, underutilized in Cincinnati, and will show just how good he is. And he could conceivably, I'd be very, very, I'd be very proud. A little bit lost for words there. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he got stats in that range of 80-something catches, 1,100 yards, and 7-8 touchdowns, because he's that good in my opinion. But he doesn't have that Calvin factor. Now, teams started playing him a little bit one-on-one, but there are some that still had that safety always eyeing him, the game planning, the preparation. And you also have to keep in mind the chemistry with Matt Stafford. It may take a little getting used to how Marvin Jones operates. Now, Andy Dalton, say what you want about him, he is decent when it comes to accuracy. And so hopefully Jones can adapt to that. But back to Calvin and what we losing him as a team. It's going to hurt. We saw glimpses of Stafford relying on other guys this year. We saw glimpses of Jim Bob Cooter getting the ball spread around. Supposedly, everyone's happy with the progress Ebron made. It's going to have to be a collective thing. It's not just exit Calvin, enter Marvin Jones, and he has to be Calvin. He can't be. Doesn't work that way. Ebron stepping up. Golden Tate. We saw what Golden Tate did those 3 games in 2014 when Calvin was out. Golden Tate went in, got 3 catches for a couple yards, and in the first quarter, you're looking like, man, then he just exploded. All 3 games, over 100 yards, taking care of business. We need to see more of that. Ebron, like we mentioned, Marvin Jones, whatever else they do in terms of free agency, or guys like TJ Jones stepping up. And yes, the weapon known as Theo Reddick. And so it's going to have to be a collective thing. I still think this offense will click. I think Stafford will still pick up big numbers and put up the stats. And so ultimately it will affect us. But I think we've equipped ourselves in terms of coaching, in terms of maturation from certain players, including number 9. We should be able to survive and make it without Calvin. But only time will tell. It was a rough adjustment for the defense losing Sue. And so the offense is kind of taking a similar hit. Now, the defense lost Sue and Levy, and then Ahedibo got super old. So did Rasheem Mathis. So it wasn't just one guy, but that one guy being Sue was the biggest guy. And with him leaving, the defense just kind of struggled, and then they found their way. We'll see about this offense. Will they just, without Calvin, kind of just falter at first? Will there be some chemistry issues? You would have to assume these things will happen. You lose a guy this big that's been a fixture on your team for so long, but time will tell. Ultimately, we love Calvin. We wish him the best. And I think he's done. I don't think he pulls the Brett Favre. I don't think he comes back, for one last hurrah to help us out. I think the man is done. He's moving on, driving off to the sunset, getting married this summer. Hall of Famer, Ring of Honor, best Lion receiver ever, one of the best Lions of all time, Calvin Megatron. Dude, we love you. And we also love Roy Williams. Roy Williams' greatest contribution to the NFL is providing us with the nickname Megatron. So thank you, Roy Williams, for doing that. Now, it's really good that Martin Mayhew wasn't around when Calvin retired because, when he overreacted, gave up a fourth and a fifth for Haloti Ngata. That didn't work out too good, although Ngata is back. It was a spiral effect, too. Basically, a third round pick was gone from this year because we didn't have a fourth that we could have drafted Gabe Wright, et cetera, et cetera. Overreaction Mayhew after Calvin retired. I could see him, giving up a fourth and a fifth for, I don't know, Andre Johnson before he retired or was assumed to be quitting. Who knows? But we want to thank Bob Quinn for, not overreacting. We want to thank Roy Williams for the awesome nickname. But most importantly, seriously, we want to thank Calvin Johnson. Record-breaking seasons, all-time leader, single season reception yards. You remember 2000 and what was that? 11, the ride where he had 2 touchdowns in the first 5 games, 10 in the first 5 games. And we thought maybe he'd break the record. This man is a highlight reel. The records against Dallas, the catch over, 3-4 guys in Cincinnati. I get goosebumps watching those clips. And, man, we just probably won't see a guy like that again. We've been waiting for the next Barry. He hasn't come out. Haven't seen him. No one's been that special. Not Peterson, not, LaDainian Tomlinson, Marshall Faulk. There hasn't been another Barry. 6'5", 235, 4'3", 40 plus on the vertical, gifted, humble, hungry, great worker. Man, what a ride. I'm fortunate to say I watched it. I know you are too. Salute to Calvin. We love him. We're going to miss him. We're going to keep moving on, pressing forward. I know he'll be rooting for us hard. And, hey, we wish him the best in all of his future endeavors. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time to talk some of the moves, a couple free agency pickups, some big, some not so big, couple of names I didn't really know. One I'm sure I'm going to do bad at pronouncing. Stay right here on the Hindsight 20 as we'll be right back. Jerry Mallory here for the Hindsight 20 podcast. It's simple. Your ad can be placed right here. Send an email, hindsight20@gmail.com. Your ad can be placed right here, being a part of one of the fastest growing podcasts and podcasting networks in Metro Detroit, not just Hindsight 20, but the Detroit Sports Podcast Network as a whole. Let's do a little business. Let's make it happen. All right, we're back on the Hindsight 20 free agency. Man, a lot going on. Lions making a lot of signings. No really huge signings other than Marvin Jones, bringing a few guys back. And let's talk how the signings really affect what this team is going to be going forward. So I've got the list in front of me. I'm going to name all of them off, and then we'll go ahead and discuss some of them, what were the impact, and a few rumors. There's still some signings, still some holes to fill, as well as how it impacts what we do in the draft. So we got some guys that are re-signed. You've got Teron Walker, another 1-year show me deal. Defensive tackle. He got hurt in the game against Seattle, missed the season after that. And so he's back on another 1-year deal at $2.25 million. Haloti Ngata is back 2 years. And that one is about $12 million a year. Tahir Whitehead, 2 years, $8 million. He's back. Dan Orlovsky, going to be your backup once again. He'll probably be fighting with a rookie to be the primary backup to Stafford versus being the third string. And so Don Mulback, is there any surprise that Donnie Mull is back, the Mulldozer, your long snapper? This guy is a fixture. He'll probably sign another 12 one-year contracts with the Detroit Lions. He isn't going anywhere. You got to love it. A guy who's been on the team this long, made decent money. He can walk the streets without being noticed, have a nondescript life, but yet and still, he's still mixing it up with the best athletes around the world. Not saying he isn't. He's a part of that too. Got to be pretty cool. It's like, those actors that kind of play bit roles. They're schmoozing with Tom Cruise and Will Smith, but, they can go to Cedar Point without getting mobbed. Got to love it. Don Mulback is that. He's like the character in the movie, the big character that is schmoozing with the big dogs and can still go to Cedar Point, can still go to the mall without getting mobbed. He can use the restroom without someone slipping a piece of paper under what about the mix urinal mixed with stall, the Eurostall, whatever you want to call it, trying to get his autograph. So that's cool. You also have Cresden Butler, cornerback, coming back. And so that's pretty good. Some of the guys that we wanted to bring back, we were looking at, and sure enough, they're going to fit. Now, Travis Lewis, he's going elsewhere. He signed with the Minnesota Vikings. My boy, this one hurts. Issa Abdul-Quddus, he's gone, signed with the Miami Dolphins. Don't like that, but, you wish him the best. Now, a few guys that we ended up bringing in, Marvin Jones, who we're going to be talking about in a second, 5 years, $40 million. Tavon Wilson, backup guy, depth of the Patriots. Then John Batamosai, I'm sure I'm saying that name wrong. He signed a 2-year deal, 4.5. Now, this is a guy who's going to bring you depth in terms of special teams. He's one of the best in terms of special teams. Stephon Charles, defensive tackle, 1-year deal. And then Raphael Bush. Now, he's a good player, very sure tackler, but he's always hurt. If he can stay healthy, he's like a rich man's James Ahedable. He signed a 1-year deal worth $2.4 million. Let's talk about some of these. Got to start off with Marvin Jones. The heir apparent to Calvin? No, not necessarily. But I like the fact that he wants that shot to be the number one, not to be the next Calvin, but to get his own shine. You're sitting there in Cincinnati. It's AJ Green. It's Tyler Eifert. You're not getting any love. You're going to be the third option here. He has the ability and the opportunity to be the number one option. And he signed a pretty good deal, 5 years, $40 million. The guy is young and I like him a lot. He reminds me of a poor man's Terrell Owens. He's got good size, speed, and he's got really good hands. He's been in the top 5 the last few years when it comes to drop rate. His drop rate is extremely low. That means he keeps hold of the ball. When it's thrown to him, he catches it. You got to love that. You got Golden Tate, who's sure-handed. You got Marvin Jones. It was the guy I predicted that we would sign. He was on my wish list. We got him, and I'm very pleased with it. Hungry. I think he's going to show us some things. I think he's going to show out with the upgraded opportunity, the opportunity to just snatch that number one position. Now, Golden Tate he's not going to relinquish that. He's been here. He's a fixture, a little chemistry with Stafford, Jim Bob Cooter in the system. It's a friendly rivalry. I think they'll feed off of each other, and I think Marvin Jones is going to come out on top. I think Golden Tate is really suited for that slot, and he'll put up good numbers too. But Big Marvin, I like this guy a lot. He's a fine football player, okay? Not Calvin, but like I said, think of poor man's Terrell Owens with the size, with the strength. He's ready, he's hungry, and so I'm loving this move. You bring him in at a decent contract. He'll be young for the duration of it. He'll be in his early 30s once this thing is over. And at $8 million, you got to love that. It's a good price for a guy with the potential to be your number one receiver. Now, Tavon Wilson, depth. That's all you're getting. Special teams, especially with Johnson Batamosi. I think I called him John early on. I knew I'd mess his name up somehow. He's a special teams ace, ex of the Cleveland Browns. Bob Quinn, to me, had a defined goal. He looked at some areas that we really struggled in, and he attacked. He signed 3 defensive tackles, tried to get Akeem Hicks. Why? The run defense really struggled last year, guys. It was bad. We gave up lots of 100-plus yards, big chunks. And so he's like, I need all these guys back and more. We need depth. We need depth. We need depth. Same with special teams. Now, this is the gripe I've had. Maybe Bob Quinn watched tape and saw what I've seen since the days of Stan Kwan, okay? We're going way back with our special teams coach, even with Stan Kwan. To me, it seemed like, and this is particularly on punts, punt returns, punt coverage. It always seems like the other team, when we punt the ball, there's no one near them. Okay. And it's not really Sam Martin's fault. He put decent hang time on some of his punts. Pretty good punter. But it's like our coverage guys, our gunners, they aren't there. And you're sitting there. It seems like the opposing team always has 4 or 5 yards of space to make a punt return. Conversely, when it's our turn and Golden Tate's back there or Amir Abdullah, it's fair catch city. Why? Because the opposing team is right there. We don't have any cushion to really make punt returns. And so I'm hoping Bob Quinn saw this. It's just a minor gripe observation I've been seeing for quite some time on this team. And I'm hoping that he attacked that with that reason, with that goal, bringing in Tavon, bringing in Johnson. You like these deals. Stephon Charles, again, he had a good look at him from Buffalo. So he saw him twice a year. That's cool, man. More depth and opportunity to break that rotation. Now, talking about defensive tackle, what do you think the rotation is going to look like? Now, initially, I thought Karan Reed was going to be the starter, and then Teron Walker with Haloti Ngata being the backup. Haloti Ngata's making starting money, and so I'm guessing they're going to roll with Ngata and Teron Walker. And then your defensive tackle rotation, you've got big Karan Reed that's going to get a good look. Then you've got Stephon Charles in there. What about Gabe Wright? Where does this leave him? Especially with the fact that we may draft a guy. In addition to that, we were talking to Akeem Hicks, trying to bring in another D tackle. That doesn't bode well for the young buck, in my opinion. We're looking at all these D tackles. Who's going to be the odd man out? More than likely, it's not going to be these guys you just signed to deals, especially if you draft a guy. Maybe they're looking at Gabe Wright and saying, we just don't know. But hey, the more the merrier. You got plenty of depth at this position now. You got 4 guys with the potential of bringing in someone else. And so you got to like that. Now, like I said, Raphael Bush, he has to stay healthy. And so that's all depending upon his health, because I feel a lot more comfortable with him out there as opposed to Tavon Wilson. So we may have to look at safety, getting another guy, because if Mr. Bush goes down, I don't know about Tavon Wilson being your starter. Now, Tahir Whitehead, he talked to, I think Miami looked at him for a second, maybe the Vikings, Bengals, Eagles, a lot of teams that were interested in his services. I'm really glad he's coming back to the fold. And according to, your Dave Burkett's and the other guys on Twitter, he really wanted to be a middle linebacker. That's where he flourished in 2014. I think he gets that opportunity. Now, here's the cool thing, because like Bob Quinn said, the traditional thumper, it's kind of going the way of the dodo bird. And this is why I think Reggie Ragland may be falling in the draft, looking sluggish, looking slow. Yeah, he can hit you hard, but you got to be good in coverage. And the Lions run a lot of nickel. A good portion of the time, it's not going to be 3 linebackers out there. A good portion, you're going to have Quandre Diggs out there and 2 linebackers. Now, Tahir Whitehead has good speed. And I think he has the ability, if he fine-tunes some things, to be good in coverage. So this is really cool, because you're going to have the option of any of your 3 linebackers, I think, being able to drop back in coverage. If Tahir Whitehead is your middle, he has enough speed and athleticism. Whoever you have as your outside linebacker, you're assuming you're signing the guy because, hey, he's a outside linebacker. He's going to be adept and capable of being in coverage. And so at any moment, Levy's going to be out there running like a maniac. Then Tahir and or your outside linebacker on 3rd and longs will step up. Much better than Tulloch. Tulloch was just bad last year, guys. I know technically he's still on the team. We have to wait and see. He just did not look good at all. He definitely looked bad in coverage. We got killed on those cross patterns, a large part due to him. So what's left? What do we got to do? Well, we got a lot left. Russell Okung, a contract was offered by the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's looking like now maybe they are the favorites. We were looking like the favorites at one point. I told you about Russell Okung, I think a podcast or 2 ago. My number 1 target was Kelvin Beachum. Really like to bring him here. Young, lots of potential with the ACL, though. Some people are worried. Okung is slightly overrated, but I would have loved to bring him in, especially if the price is right. Even though he's a more of a name than his talent shows, he would have still, in my opinion, been the best guy on this team in terms of tackle. And if you're looking at a rotation of Okung and Reef at the right side, so Okung left, Reef right, with Michael Ola, and I still think we'll be addressing in the draft early a tackle. I'm really thinking Taylor Decker. The more I think about it, the more I ponder it. I would not be surprised if he was the pick at 16. I would like that rotation a lot. So, Joe Barksdale gone. Really wanted him, thought he could have been had for cheap. Here's the deal. If Okung doesn't sign, we need a veteran. We need to bring one in. We have to sign a guy that can come in and start, preferably at left tackle, move Reef to the right, Ola there, and then a draft pick. Again, it's all about depth with Bob Quinn. I like that he's really focused on bringing in not just one or two guys at a position, but a number. And so tackle is certainly there. If we can't bring in Russell Okung, you still got Donald Penn out there, a little bit older, but he can give you probably a year or two, kick the tires on him. Defensive end, we need two of them. We've got Devin Taylor, we got Ziggy Ansah. Maybe one comes from the draft. I'm sitting here at round 1, and I just got a tingling now that we're going to either take a risk on Noah Spence, or if Emmanuel Ogba is there, or Taylor Decker. Those are the 3 guys right now that Jerry Mallory is like, I think the Lions will be looking at one of the 3 and drafting. And so, but even that being said, we still probably need to bring in a veteran, either as a starter or as a heavy rotational guy. You give Devin Taylor a chance to start, give him additional looks. It may be okay, but I will be comfortable with another guy. I mean, Chris Long, kick the tires on him? I don't know. Bring Daryl Tapp back, bring Jason Jones back. I think, again, just like the tackle situation, we need to draft a guy at defensive end and sign a veteran. Same with cornerback. I mean, Nevin Lawson, he looked good as your number 2. Would not be mad though if we brought in that veteran. So I'm still looking at your Leon Halls, who could be your new Rasheem Mathis, an older guy that has the ability to beat out someone for the number 2 spot. But if he doesn't, he's still there for insurance. So we've got some needs, as well as running back, another tight end, potentially maybe a Jermaine Gresham because he can block. So free agency, although the big portion is gone, these guys are getting some huge money. There's still lots of value to be had. And so we have to sit and wait. I think this week we'll round it out. We'll get an interior lineman, whether he can play center and or guard. I think the tackle will be signed. I'm hoping it's Russell Okung. He is an upgrade. If not, it will be maybe a Donald Penn or someone of that ilk. Again, defensive end, cornerback, and hey, the way we like defensive tackles, maybe another defensive tackle. So with all these signings that have been had, what does it say about the draft? Well, even before these signings were made, I was of the opinion that we probably won't be going D-tackle in the first round because of the depth in the draft. And now you bring back Walker, you've got Reed, you've got Nada, you've got Stephon Charles. I mean, it's not out of the question because like Walker and Charles are on 1-year deals. Nada could essentially be a 1-year deal. So, I mean, it is possible. I think receiver maybe got bumped out of the first round. Laquan Treadwell, really the realistic guy there. I think anyone else has a potential to drop. I've been hearing Corey Coleman drop into the second round. I would like that a lot. I would like that. He reminds me of Randall Cobb. He reminds me of Golden Tate. But in terms of your first round, I would say receiver probably dropped out and potentially defensive tackle. Other than that, everything is on the table. We haven't made any signings yet that would say, oh, this guy's young. There's no way. Obviously you take quarterback out the equation, but other than that, running back, if they like Ezekiel Elliott, wouldn't be surprised. Better not be tight end, okay? Or I'm going to hurt someone. But everything else is on the table. I think, though, if I'm narrowing it down, like I said, Noah Spence, defensive end, Emmanuel Ogba, defensive end, Taylor Decker, offensive tackle. Those are the 3 guys I've kind of penciled in as targets for the Lions. It's going to be a busy week next week, or this upcoming week. Sometimes that first week, these guys get crazy money, but you find some good deals. Sometimes by waiting, some of the shine, some of the bigger names are gone. You got Olivier Vernon getting crazy money. You've got Malik Jackson getting crazy money. Now it's time to go bargain shopping. Okay, I know a thing or two about the secondhand store. There's not always the best stuff there, but if you look hard enough, you look at these thrift shops, which are trendy now, you can find some good deals. You can find some deals better than that expensive coat you bought from H&M for $150. So it should be an interesting week, but we got to close it again. Calvin, we love you. We're going to miss you. And as is the case in life, life goes on. Life without Calvin, it's time to experience it. I don't think any of us was ready for it, but here we are. We support all his endeavors, and we're looking at this team, looking to see who we can bring in. We want to build. We want to build. We want to build. We want to bring in talent. And I think Bob Quinn is up to the task. Not a lot of glitzy signings yet, but Marvin Jones was a really good one. I think our tackle of the future, as in the next couple of years, will be signed. And the meat and potatoes is going to be the draft. Close it out. We did pick up 2 compensatory picks, the first of all the compensatory picks in the 3rd round, which would be like pick 95, as well as the 6th. The 3rd was for Ndamukong Suh, and the 6th was for Nick Fairley. So now we have 10 draft picks, tons of picks to make, some more free agents to sign. We'll talk a little bit more draft in the next episode. Going to try to get a personality or 2 on here. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Jerry Mallory NFL. Until next time, this has been Jerry Mallory, the Hindsight 20 podcast.